Didst thou think that I was finished? You don't know me, and you have no idea how much these films work for me.
Sully, stick together.
No, the other one.
Sully never quits.
That's right. Sully's never quit.
Hello romance girlies, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. If this is somehow your first video of mine, I would direct you to go watch my first two videos about Avatar Fire and Ash because this is very much a follow-up, an update. I'm not going to go over all of the talking points I've already discussed in detail, though if I have something else that I would like to add that connects to things I've previously discussed in those videos, I will. This is my third video about Avatar Fire and Ash because I've been continuing to do my rewatches at the cinema. This is a prime example of why I pay for a monthly pass to go to the cinema. If there are loads of films releasing around a similar time that I want to be able to watch, I am able to do so. Or if I have one film that I want to rewatch on the big screen again and again, I may also do so. I did accomplish what I declared to be a fundamental goal in regards to watching this, which was to hit double digits of theatrical viewings of Fire and Ash, and currently I am at how many viewings?
14.
What?
14.
Anyway, with more rewatches, I have additional thoughts. Also, there are things that I had already thought about, but simply didn't include in prior videos because those videos were already long enough as is. But then occasionally folks in the comments would mention those particular bits or ask about them, and then I would think, well, perhaps I should just do another video about Fire and Ash and talk about those things then. Let's go through my notes. Some folks in the audience have been rather harsh on Loak, and they use one of his earlier lines in this film as a justification to blame him for Neteyam's death, which is absolutely wild to do, to blame his so-called recklessness instead of the imperialist war criminals who invaded Pandora in the first place with the express purpose of colonizing the planet.
How dare you!
But yes, Loak, after visiting with Neteyam, says in his opening inner monologue that he killed his brother. But to use that line as proof of his so-called guilt is either being intellectually dishonest or obtuse, because if you fast forward to the council meeting with the Tulkun elders when they are trying to unjustly banish Pyakon for the umpteenth time, and then Loak is trying to stand up for him, and Jake pulls Loak aside and tries to blame Loak, what does Loak say to him? That it wasn't his fault. Weird how the selective memory gets quiet when you bring up that part of the film, now doesn't it? Most of these notes were ones that I wrote down in sequential order, but we will jump around whenever. So, when Spider watches people connecting underwater and he gently takes hold of Kiri's kuru and says, I wish I could do it, my guy, you fell in love with the daughter of Ewa herself. You're in a love story with the offspring of a deity. So you know what that means? Wish granted. And he doesn't even realize that that's who she really is because that's not information that's been readily shared at this point. That's why he's worthy. They fell in love with each other because of their hearts. James Cameron is a romance girly. I will keep saying that because I want to, and because it's true.
And that's not my fault, that's science.
When Loak is narrating the film's opening, and he's explaining the differences between the Na'vi way of grieving versus how his father grieves, he describes Jake's method as say nothing, keep busy. Not very healthy, is it? But that is a very accurate description of how we see Jake conducting himself throughout this film. Now, do I pick on Jake for having the audacity to default to toxic patriarchal sky people parenting towards his sons? Absolutely, and I mean every word of that. And this is not something that I'm saying just because Neteyam is dead now. Jake was like this after the first weapons run we saw happen in the Way of Water.
You're supposed to be spotters. You spot bogeys and you call them in. From a distance!
But to be fair to Jake, because nuance is a thing, they're all very busy trying to fend off imperialist violence from the Sky People, and now the death squad that the Sky People have armed, you do know that that's what the Mongwan are. Those weapons tutorials? That's textbook Escuela de las Americas. Operation Condor, Operation Cyclone, Project Phoenix, it's all the same tactics, just rinse and repeat it in different locations. The Mongwan are that exact concept enrobed in the Pandora world building. Remember when Quaritch was in the tent with Varang for the first time, and his pitch was that he can further arm her so that she may command from a distance, strike like lightning? If you've read up on history, it's very recognizable.
Command from a distance, strike like lightning.
Yet another reason why I need to see Avatar 4 and 5 is that I really want to know if more of the Na'vi will start to use weapons of metal, because I do understand why James Cameron opted to not have them do that in this film, because you want to make a clear point about what it is that Quaritch is doing and what parts of real life history that is recreating. But personally, I'm of the belief that if some Na'vi would like to learn how to use them, it's valid, because it's a time of armed struggle. I did notice Spider's tattoo on a first watch, but I didn't think too much about bringing that up as a point of discussion. But I will note that it feels like one of those details that exemplifies how I would be fine with these films being even longer, or if they release an extended cut. I know that they need to do things in a way that makes them work for an audience beyond just the most devoted, enthusiastic fans of the material, but Spider had a tattoo around his arm, and the main Metkaina teenagers that we know have all gotten tattoos on their faces, on their forehead, above their right eyebrows. Is that merely something that happens when you reach a particular age, or do you have to complete some sort of task to earn that tattoo? I have no idea, but Spider's tattoo was on his arm, and he's always eager to prove himself, so if they were to ask him to complete a task to earn one, I'm sure he would have done it with zero complaints. In The Way of Water, they introduced the phrase "Sullies stick together," and in this film, they expanded that to also include "Sullies never quit." Well, I'm going to take it upon myself to add to that, because it's a very loud sentiment that has been blaring all throughout this part of the Avatar saga. Sullies never snitch. Think about this. How many times does Spider get kidnapped by his abusive war criminal not father? And they're always trying to get some information out of him. They wanted to know where the Sully family was. And what did he say? "I don't know," over and over again, and he refused to tell them even though they were Guantanamo Baying him, a child. You will never make me root for Quaritch, no matter how nuanced of a villain they turn him into. And then when they took Spider this time, they want to know how it is that he can breathe the Pandoran air. They might scan him and learn about the material that's in his system, but they don't know how it got there and reworked his entire genetic makeup. Because Sullies never snitch, and Spider would never rat Kitty out like that, and James Cameron is a romance girly. Moreover, remember when the kids were in the forest and the Mongquan caught up with them, and Varong was demanding to know how to make thunder? Do you know what Loak didn't do? Teach her how it works. He said it was empty, which could be true, but he could have still explained how that machine works and how you have to reload it after using it a certain amount, but he said nothing of the sort. And do you know why? Because Sullies never snitch. When Quaritch and Wainfleet are looking over the aftermath after the Mongquan attack on the Wind Traders, and Jake is explaining how the Mongquan have cut the Kurus, Wainfleet says, "That's worse than death to these guys." I beg your finest pardon. What do you mean, these guys? You have a kudu. It would be unfathomably horrific and traumatic if you were to have your kudu cut. It's symptomatic of how strong the brainwashing is for those who do the dirtiest labor of the imperialist agenda. Wainfleet deserves to have a shoe thrown at him. Many shoes, actually. All of the shoes thrown. When Kitty performs the ritual to save Spider and change his biological makeup, they cut to the sky and they show the clouds moving very quickly. And then they cut back to the forest where Kitty is doing the ritual and Loak and Tuk have dozed off, meaning she was working on saving her man for hours. She was doing this ritual for hours. James Cameron is a romance girly. And when she started to seize up, Loak broke the connection. A lot of the material around Kitty, her powers, her trajectory, have been mysterious, but they've often emphasized how it's really dangerous if she were to connect again, she could have a seizure and die in the process. I'm open to changing my ideas about her material if we get more information that clarifies things or takes them in a different direction, preferably in Avatar 4 and 5. But for now, looking at how her arc has spanned 2 and 3, and in particular, what has happened in 3, here's what I think. She was repeatedly told that she cannot connect because she would have a seizure and die. When she talks to Ronal before the final battle in Fire and Ash, Ronal tells her, if there's something you can do, you must do it. Kitty sees the battle shifting once the Death Squad shows up. They cannot win without her taking action. She knows the risks, but she's willing to potentially sacrifice herself for all of Pandora. In the name of Ewa, Kitty, and the Warrior Mother.
Father, Son, and House of Gucci.
But she doesn't die because she has Spider and Took with her, which is the point. This is a considerably more collectivist approach to doing an epic fantastical saga on the big screen than what you would usually see from a major Hollywood studio, but I think it suits the story and the themes that are being addressed. Even though Kitty is this special, super-powered character, even she cannot call upon the warrior mother without her loved ones being by her side. They cannot win this battle unless they do so together. And I love that. Back to the forest when Kitty first changed Spider. The Monkwans show up, and I'm fairly certain Spider told Kitty and Took, "Stay behind me." Really, Spider? Kitty, the love of your life, who is a head taller than you? If there's one thing Spider's got, it's spirit. But it's sweet, it's romantic, and he will always give a valiant effort, and that's why he's worthy to breathe the air of Pandora. Also, when the Monkwan descend upon these kids, Took is afraid at first, understandable, I would be too. But then what does she do? She gets her knife out and she starts hissing. I need all of you to know that that baby is her mother's daughter. She's afraid because she's a child and her size is a major disadvantage in a conflict like this. But in a time jump, going to Avatar 4 and 5, I would not be surprised in the slightest if she sprints down the path that her mother has paved of being a fierce and mighty warrior. Did we not all see what happened at the end when Jake and Quaritch were having this awkward post-brawl chat with Spider seated between them, and then the entire Sully family flew up, and they all had their weapons out, ready to execute that demon, and I was ready to watch. Neytiri and Took were hissing louder than anyone. I go back and forth about who I want to finally take out Quaritch permanently this time, and I often have leaned towards Neytiri because of that one clip of her that I often use when I'm editing other videos here on my channel.
Demon! I will kill you as many times as I have to.
But now, after seeing how much they put Took through in this movie, let little Took give Quaritch the dirt nap he should have had 50 crimes ago. When the Sully family and Quaritch are being held captive by the Monkwan, what does Kitty do? She connects to the forest, but more specifically, her kudu moves. I was looking closely at a lot of different instances of Tsahelu throughout Fire and Ash during all of these rewatches. No one else's kudu moves of its own accord like that. This is a major leveling up of Kitty's powers, and I don't think enough people are talking about that. Actually, that's not true. People probably are talking about this, but I'm just increasingly pulling away from being on social media. But anyway, this evolution of her powers is extremely important because when she overpowers Varang at the end of the film to save her mother, Kitty's kudu just lunges at Varang's kudu to make Tsahelu, and she also throws Varang through her kudu. Her kudu lunges and snaps forward, and that's what tosses Varang. What happens to Kitty's powers in Avatar 4 and 5? I need those movies greenlit immediately. I'm not done with these rewatches, by the way. I keep finding more and more things to ponder, and there are no other Hollywood blockbusters that are delivering the way that these do. Tarsem, the new Oloektan of the Omaticaya, he is so sweet and caring in this movie. They really chose well at Jake's replacement, and I feel better knowing that the Omaticaya are in good hands like his. The way that he was helping to carry Neytiri when she was injured, and he was staying put with Moat and Norm while she was recovering from the surgery, him immediately asking where the children are when Neytiri wakes up and is panicking about them being in danger, and the way that he rides off with her and the others to go rescue them, that is a worthy leader. That is a worthy Oloektan. And I would really love to see more of him in 4 and 5, especially if we spend more time in the forest next time. I enjoy the way they make a point of showing time passing in this film. I already mentioned the clouds that were in the sky when Kitty was doing her ritual to change Spider, but another example of this is Neytiri doing her strength training when she's recovering from her injury. That also shows how there are consequences to her injury. She cannot immediately jump back into a battle, and it also makes the emotional payoff far more significant once she's had this time to work on getting her strength back, and Loak is able to finally gift her the repaired family heirloom, her father's bow. Also, Neytiri's injury from the arrow that Varang shot, a few details I want to note about that. First, she proceeded to continue to fight Varang while the back of that arrow was still sticking out. At the end of Fire and Ash, Jake does that incredible brawl with Quaritch on the rocks while Jake still has part of an arrow in his leg because he needed to pack the wound. Those two are the blueprints. They are the mightiest of warriors. They bring a whole new meaning to the term power couple. The other detail about Neytiri's wound, the location of it, is in the same place that Ronal is fatally injured in. That is an absolutely devastating way to show how those two reached a full circle of their relationship. They've been hissing at each other for 2 entire films. Ronal keeps calling Neytiri's mixed children rude names. These children are not even true Nahvi, your half-blood daughter. And how do we reach full circle? A wound in the same place, and Neytiri making sure that Ronal is able to give birth before passing away, as well as helping Ronal to make Tsahelu with baby Pril. You can see Neytiri holding Ronal's kuru and separating the connection once Ronal has passed away. The emotional havoc this film wreaks must be studied.
Oh, wait a minute. I've already done that.
When Payakan is banished yet again by the Tulkun elders and leaves sad and alone, it reminded me of something I talked about in one of my other Fire and Ash videos. Remember how I talked about how Loak in The Way of Water went off and he got attacked and was especially vulnerable because he was left there all alone? But then in Fire and Ash, he had all of his Metkaina friends there as well as their Tulkuns to help save him. Well, Payakan having that first meeting that we see in Fire and Ash go really badly, and then the second time, once he comes back, he's not alone there. He's not alone anymore either. He has Nahvi and Tulkun friends to support him. Do you see the parallels? Because I do. Loak and Payakan aren't alone anymore, not just because they have each other, but the togetherness expands beyond just having that one really good friend. When Quaritch goes to arm the Mangwan and get himself a new death squad since the other recoms got, Varang asks what his name is and he says, Quaritch, Colonel Miles Quaritch. I knew that that was his name, but I never think about the fact that he's named Miles because no one ever calls him that. But something about hearing him say that name out loud made me think about The Way of Water when they took the kids hostage the first time, since they're disgusting war criminals who do that very often, so I need to specify. It's the first time, and he asks Spider for his name, and of course he says Spider, and then what does Quaritch call him? Miles.
Miles?
Nobody calls me that.
And do you know what that connection immediately made me think of? Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Exactly. No matter what sort of complex emotions get kicked up in Spider by all of these traumatic experiences he has with Quaritch, the answer was already established. Spider made his decision ages ago. Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Spider would never align himself with profaners of this neighbor-stained steel. That's not who he is. When Varang asks Quaritch, what do I want? It scratches a very specific itch in my brain. It's a memory of Stuart Townsend playing Lestat in Queen of the Damned when he says,
Tell me more about me.
You want...
What do I want?
That's not what you really want.
What do I want?
That's definitely not an intended connection that this film is doing. That's just a memory I happen to have embedded in my mind because Vampire Alia is an automatic fast track to becoming a cult classic. When the weapons shipment arrives and they're distributed to Varang and the rest of the Mangwan, one of the most disturbing things about that scene is how she uses the flamethrower to destroy the home of one of the Mangwan. I mean, we already saw her commanding one of them to allow her to burn them into flying into the Wind Trader's ship. You have a leader who asks you to commit senseless violence, who will gleefully burn you out of your home for the sake of weapons testing? A very pointed call out, if ever I saw one. Remember how I talked about how Loak has this evolution of going from telling himself that what happened to Neteyam was his fault, to then standing up to his father and saying that it's not his fault? Well, I was thinking about how when they're recovering weapons from the sunken ship and Loak also retrieves Neytiri's bow, Jake says to him, "You're supposed to be collecting guns. That thing is useless. Don't let your mother see that." And on one of my rewatches, I don't remember which one, I was listening to Jake say these things and I thought to myself, well, you're wrong. And then I immediately had this aha moment of remembering that Jake literally says further on into the film that he was wrong, but he says it to Neytiri. They're talking about how he said he could protect this family, but now Neteyam is with the ancestors. I don't think people should underestimate how impactful it is to see a father doing things the wrong way and then actually considering the idea that maybe he was wrong. Even though he's not saying it directly to his children, how many viewers are running around with varying degrees of parental trauma and now they get to see a parent admitting that perhaps they got it wrong? Loak saying that the spirit of his ancestors is in the bow when he's showing the broken pieces to Tsireya, and then her telling him later that the spirit of the ancestors is in him. Listen, I know that some people wish that there was even more romantic material shown in this film for Loak and Tsireya, but I'm telling you that it's there. Them giddily waving and calling each other's names when Loak is up with the wind traders, her helping him to fix the bow and assuring him that the strength is in him, him having this silly grin on his face when he wakes up after having almost died in the Tseong attack, just because he's happy to see her. Also, Loak telling Tsireya that he likes her face tattoo. James Cameron is a romance girly. You're also forgetting the part where Tsireya tells Loak, "We love you," when her and Kitty ran up to check on him. In another story, that would have led to an entire scene of her going, "Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to tell him that this early," and so on and so forth. But the stakes are much higher than that, so we don't. Just go see the film again. Help to get Avatar 4 and 5 greenlit, and I'm sure James Cameron will give them even more romantic material to perform. And speaking of romantic material, the part where Quaritch and the Mongkwan show up to Awaetlu and force Jake to come with them when Jake is being flown away, he and Neytiri just stay staring at each other, and on one of my rewatches, I had a realization of why it was so familiar. Remember when Jack Dawson sent Rose onto one of the lifeboats and they maintained this long, intense romantic eye contact, and then she just throws herself back onto the sinking ship because she will not be kept away from him? Is this not the same thing? Long, prolonged romantic eye contact, and then she has to throw herself headfirst into danger because she won't be kept apart from her man when he's in danger. James Cameron is a romance girly. What does Neytiri do after all that prolonged eye contact? Does she leave him in danger? No, she goes after him, just like Rose did when she jumped back on a sinking ship.
Rose!
And what happens when Neytiri finally reaches Jake on the RDA base? "Ma Jake." And Jake says, "Baby, I don't know whether to kiss you or yell at you." Doesn't that have the same energy as Jack and Rose when they first reunite back on the sinking ship after she jumped back onto it?
You're so stupid! Why'd you do that, huh?
Quaritch bringing the Mongkwan to the RDA base and being scolded by General Ardmore, who uses the most old-school anti-indigenous vocabulary. Remember how I pointed out how Wainfleet was using that distancing language when talking about the cut kurus? Quaritch is absolutely delusional for thinking that he is immune from the anti-Na'vi bigotry of these imperialist sky people. You didn't think the leopards would eat your face too, Quaritch? Maybe try growing a brain and using it for once, you absolute Neanderthal. But then, when Ardmore postures for the crowd, that was so emblematic of how a major pillar of the war machine is propaganda. A world-building bit that I enjoy is the way we can observe how the word Mongkwan has a multifaceted use. When Varang first gets snatched up by Quaritch in the forest, he grabbed her kuru, and he's ordering the other Mongkwans to put their weapons down. She doesn't say Ma Wei to them, she says Mongkwan, though the tone of her delivery sounded similar to Ma Wei. Moreover, when Quaritch has joined the Mongkwan in their makeshift camp that they set up on the RDA base, and he took one of their beverage containers and he goes, "We are the fire, Mongkwan." So you can also use the word Mongkwan to mean kampai, or whatever you watching this say in your mother tongue when toasting. That's something I appreciate about these films. The more that you watch them, the more closely you inspect the details, the more that you find because of how much labor has gone into the world building. The lore is consistent. And that's not only James Cameron creating things and just thinking things up. The labor is outsourced to specialists when it makes sense to do so. Create a new spoken language, a new sign language, new traditions, new cultures, the fantastical science of this world with the kurus and making tsahelu, the list goes on and on. Another detail that did considerable emotional damage to me was how many animals suffered through this war. I'm pretty sure both Kiri and Loak lost their ikrans in this film. Loak also lost his ilu to the Seong. And this is also telling me quite a bit about James Cameron's detailed knowledge of what happens when imperialists commit their crimes. Because I'm currently in the middle of reading another one of Michael Parenti's books. This one is called The Sword and the Dollar. And this book gives loads of examples of the devastation and destruction that imperialism has unleashed all over the world. And numerous examples explicitly include animals being targeted too. We've talked about the Project Phoenix patches in other coverage I've already published about Fire and Ash. Well, Phoenix is mentioned in this book, The Sword and the Dollar. There are also examples given in the book pertaining to US-trained dictatorships committing horrific violence, torture, and interrogations to people by way of things like electrical shocks. Remember when they used an electrical prod on one of the Na'vi in Fire and Ash? An electrical prod on their kudu. I need all these sky people gone. Everyone except the scientists that are already with the Omaticaya and Dr. Garvin. Everyone else can get out. Also, the incessant burning people's homes, that's yet another thing that's mentioned in the book. This is just all real history, but painted a different color. After Jake tells Quaritch that Quaritch needs to really see this world, connect to something bigger than himself, it's specifically the conversation that they have inside the large public cell Jake is being held in on the RDA base. We see Quaritch lying with Varang in her new tent, and he's holding her kudu, and he's looking at it. That's such a loaded moment, because when you remember all of the pain and power she wields through her kudu, and she's allowing him to hold it, that says quite a bit about their connection, but also I think that Jake's words are burrowing their way into the deeper crevices of his mind. But if we don't get Avatar 4 and 5, we will never see the outcome of this. In the final battle, again, the moment where Kiri jumps into the water so she can go connect and call upon the warrior mother, there is something really funny about how she jumps in when the others are telling her no. And then Spider immediately jumps in after her because James Cameron is a romance girly. And then Loak jumps in after them, but first he warns Took to stay put, don't follow them. But guess what Took did? She followed and connected alongside Spider and Kiri to help Kiri call upon the warrior mother. Jake, I'm going to need you to quit picking on your son when you do the exact same thing as these kids just did. Well, the people are in danger, my family's running towards danger, so I need to go run with them. That's the Sully way. How are you going to act so surprised that Loak insisted that they needed to save Spider in the previous film, and that Neteyam would insist on going with him? This is how this family operates in every situation. Neytiri infiltrated the RDA base alone with only Sata, her Ikran, to help her make that journey and get where she needed to be. This is fundamentally who this family is. And after an underwater blast breaks that trio's connection, what do we see? Spider helping Took to reach the surface. Do you know what that looked like? Tanok helping Payakan to the surface when an underwater blast had hit a rock, which fell on top of Payakan and was holding him down. Tukuns are mammals. They need to breathe air eventually or else they won't survive. You see how everything is connected? When Kiri is still underwater, having been knocked out and disoriented by the blast, what happened? That floral-looking jellyfish type of thing, I don't remember what they're called, but they help you breathe underwater if you're going to be down there for quite a while. It just approaches Kiri and nudges her awake. Where have we seen that before? Oh, maybe Sata, Neytiri's Ikran, giving her a nudge when she had been knocked out and was disoriented from fighting Varang in the sky and she fell into the forest. There's probably far more I could talk about, but I'm assuming this will be all I'll say for the time being. I am going to go see it again in cinemas, though. It's still playing. Why wouldn't I go? I want to enjoy this on the big screen while it's still available to experience that way. It's not the same if I watch it at home. Also, I need Avatar 4 and 5 to be greenlit, so I will be doing my part to make that happen. Because you know what I think has to be on the way if we get to Avatar 4 and 5? I think we're going to see Parker Selfridge's father, the boss's boss, and Hoomst will be playing him. Now, personally, I would love to see yet another James Cameron alumni show up, perhaps Michael Biehn or Ed Harris. But also, do you know who would be a perfect evil imperialist? Ramon Estevez. You offer that man a chance to teach the masses that they need to rise up and fight back against the powers that be. He will jump at the opportunity every time. Didn't you see Judas and the Black Messiah? Ramon Estevez has been arrested over 60 times in real life. Diva, you belong in the Avatar universe. Any of those actors are welcome. Are they available? Are they willing? Guess what? I'm already at the cinema. I'm ready to watch.